Going on a trip with 400 students, that can be a little stressful at times.
Jay, thank you so much for joining us on This Is Purdue. We are so thrilled to have you. You're an iconic guest for our podcast, and we know that our audience is just going to love this interview.
Thank you.
So let's go back to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your journey to Purdue. I've heard that you did not go to Purdue.
That is correct. I think it's a well-known fact that I'm an Indiana University grad, but to be quite honest, the School of Music at Indiana University is one of the greatest schools of music in the world. So I got a great education at IU, and it prepared me very well to do what I'm doing for a living. But initially I started teaching public school. I was a high school band director in South Georgia. That was my first job at a school called Hardaway High School. And then for the next 9 years, I taught public school in Hobart, Indiana, in Wheeling, Illinois, and then at North Central High School in Indianapolis. That's where I was before I came to Purdue.
So what led you here to Purdue in 1995?
Well, I had always wanted to teach in higher education. And, you know, Purdue's in my backyard. I grew up in Montgomery County, about 40 minutes south of here. And so I knew the Purdue band program. You know, I've known about it my whole life. And so just the opportunity for me to be part of such an historic program like we have at Purdue was a dream come true for me. So the appeal also to the position was that I was going to come to Purdue to conduct the symphonic band, which is the top concert band, and the symphony orchestra, both of which I had a passion for. So I never dreamed that I would stand in front of the All-American Marching Band at some point during my tenure at Purdue. But that's how I ended up here. You know, it was, to me, being part of the Purdue band program was just one of those iconic positions that I always dreamed of.
So in 2006, you became the 5th director of the All-American Marching Band.
Right.
You said that that wasn't, you know, your expectations when you first came to Purdue. So how did that come about? How did you feel, you know, when you attained that role?
Well, I taught at Purdue for 11 years before I became the director of the All-American Band. And so through those years, I had the opportunity to work with marching band students during band camp. I taught many of those students in my concert bands during the second semester, so I knew a lot of the kids. But in 2006, 2 of my colleagues retired from Purdue, and they were both directors with the All-American Marching Band, Bill Kissinger and Dave Lepla. And when I was appointed director of bands, I spoke to my vice provost, Tom Robinson, and told him I'd really like to step into the role as the director of the All-American Marching Band. This college marching band was something that I thought would be a good fit for me, and I thought I would be a good fit for the band. I love college athletics. I love college marching bands. When I was a high school band director, I was not a competition band director. Which is, you know, something we don't do at Purdue. So anyway, I thought it would be a good fit for me, and lo and behold, I found myself standing in front of the All-American Marching Band in the fall of 2006.
And, you know, what were your goals at the time when you stepped into this role in 2006?
You know, my number one goal was to maintain the rich traditions of the All-American Marching Band. At band camp one year, one of the first exercises we did with our student leadership team is had them populate a whiteboard with all the traditions of the Purdue All-American Marching Band. And in about 5 minutes, we had over 50 traditions on the whiteboard.
Wow.
And so, you know, tradition is very important to this band program. So that was my number one priority, was to maintain these traditions. Second priority was to make sure that the All-American Marching Band was an incredibly fine playing band. I wanted this college marching band to sound like a college marching band. And it's not that they didn't before, but you know, with my background as a concert band director and an orchestral conductor, I thought maybe I brought maybe a different perspective
Sure.
to the music. And so that was a priority for me. And my third priority was to make the All-American Marching Band nationally and internationally visible. And this was something that my predecessor, Al Wright, did beautifully. You know, Al took the band to South America and Europe and Canada. The marching band was known throughout the world as one of the greatest college marching bands. And I wanted to do that as well. So we did. We started traveling nationally and internationally, and the rest is history. It's been a great run.
Tell us about some of those traditions that you saw, as the students were writing them on the whiteboard.
Yeah. Well, you can divide some of our traditions by the director who created them. Okay, so you go back to our first director, and his name was Paul Spots Emmerich. And Spots was an incredible innovator, even though his degree was in engineering. Wow. Okay, so he started as a student conductor of the All-American Marching Band. Then he became the conductor of the marching band and an engineering faculty member. But while Spots was here, he brought things to the band like the Big Ten flags. So we were carrying a flag representing the colors of every Big Ten school. And of course, back in those days, there were 10, right? There were 10, and I believe University of Chicago was one of the original Big Ten schools. Spots was also responsible for purchasing the world's largest drum in 1921. And so throughout our history, the world's largest drum had been an icon for Purdue and also part of the brand of the All-American Marching Band. When Al Wright came to Purdue, Al created the Golden Girl twirling position. He also created the other solo twirling positions like the Girl in Black and the Silver Twins. And he brought to our pregame show what is known as I Am an American. And those are just a few of, I think, the more significant traditions that we had at Purdue that I knew I had to maintain. Yeah, moving forward. Those are too important to our fans.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, and I mean, football would not be the same without the All-American Marching Band. So what is your personal favorite part of these home football games?
My personal favorite is the pregame show, because the pregame show is where you find all the rich traditions, the marching style, all the traditional formations we've done for years and years, like the block P. We were the first band to break ranks from a military band to create a formation on the field, and that formation was the block P. So when you watch our pregame show, not a lot has changed over the years. We do the same block P, the same floating Purdue formation. We create the Boilermaker special on the field. And of course, we've been doing I'm an American since the late 60s. So I love our pregame show. That's one of my favorites.
So you've talked about, the legacy, the tradition, but you've also brought a lot of new things to the band. Tell us a little bit about those new things that you added and why you thought that was important.
Well, I'll start this discussion with the Big Ten flags. And remember, Spots Emmerich brought the Big Ten flags to the band back in the 1920s. Then they went away for quite a long time. I brought those back to the band because I thought just the visual pageantry of all the colors of the Big Ten flags in front of the band was spectacular, and I wanted those to exist again. In the pregame show, we started a formation that represents our net tillers boiler up. That wasn't part of our pregame show, so during Fighting Varsity, we spelled boiler up. We also now create a formation of the world's largest drum in our pregame show, which is a very unique tradition for Purdue. And of course, there's a backstory to that about when we traveled to Notre Dame just a few years ago and we couldn't bring the drum into the stadium. So now we just put it on the field. And,
I remember that well.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well, that big bass drum is such an important icon that we thought it would be appropriate to put a formation of that onto the field. So those are some new things I brought to the table with regard to our pregame show. As far as halftime is concerned, When my team and I get together to design halftime shows for the All-American Marching Band, I tell them that virtually nothing is off the table. We bring up, great ideas, and we bring up wacky ideas, and then we vet these ideas and try to think about what music would be appropriate. And so during my 19 years, we've had some incredibly fun and innovative halftime shows that I think I would consider to be a hallmark of my tenure here as the marching band director.
Absolutely. Can you tell us about a wacky idea that was maybe cut?
I can't, well, actually there was a wacky idea that we ended up doing, but we had to do a lot of work to make it happen. We wanted to do a spoof on Star Wars.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, so we did. And, but the creator of the Death Star was a character by the name of Darth Hoosier. And so the spoof was an Indiana University spoof, and we had some good laughs with that, but we had to tread lightly
Sure.
when it came to poking fun at my alma mater a little bit, but it was a fun halftime show. I also wanted to do a Marvel Comics halftime show, but I wanted all the superheroes to come from the Purdue West division, and I wanted all the villains to come from the Purdue East, and we just couldn't quite make that work, so that was another wacky idea. We also wanted to do a halftime show based on the game show The Price is Right.
Okay.
And so we had to decide which segments of The Price is Right would really work. But we ended up putting that halftime show on the field with Plinko and all the other Price is Right components, and the crowd absolutely loved it. But I would tell you that we also poked a little fun at our Hoosier friends during that halftime show too.
You have to.
Yeah, of course. Right.
So you're approaching this fall 2024 semester will be your last as the director of
Right.
the band.
Right.
How do you think you'll feel that first football game, you're on the field, kind of the first of the last?
I've already had it's just been an emotion-filled summer.
I bet.
I broke the news to my faculty last spring, and then I told my students on the weekend of the Indianapolis 500, and that was a difficult discussion, very emotional for me. When I think about my tenure in this position, and I think about it lasting 19 years, it went by just like that. So, this year is not only my final year as the director of the All-American Marching Band, this represents my 30th year at Purdue and my 40th year as a teacher.
Wow.
And, as I was discussing this recently with my wife, I told her I can remember vividly my first day of teaching in 1983. So, time goes by quickly. And I think when I stand on that ladder and conduct the Purdue fanfare at pregame, I think the memories will flood back. I look forward to that to some degree, but also I'm sure the season is going to be filled with some melancholy feelings, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Part of what makes the band so special is all of the alumni. You have just this incredible alumni base. And, Purdue Day of Giving, they always show up, right?
Right.
For homecoming, previous members come back and play. What does that alumni base mean to you as the director?
I've never seen anything like it at another university, quite frankly. I was a member of the Indiana University Marching 100 for 3 years when I was a student. And at IU, they have an alumni band that happens every year. And, they may get 100, 150 people to come back. But at Purdue, we get hundreds of alumni to come back to our alumni marching band reunion every other year. The thing about our alumni that probably hit home with me more than anything was in 2009, my wife Carolyn died of breast cancer. And we talk about the Purdue band family regularly, but it isn't till something like that happens that you realize what that really means. And in the days following her death, I received email messages and phone calls, and then received cards in the mail from Purdue band alumni that I knew and many that I had never met in my life. And that's what the alumni base means to me. You know, it truly is a family here. You know, they really showed it in 2009 when I went through that tragedy.
Absolutely. It's a special base that's just so committed to Purdue and the band.
They are, and they're committed to this band. You know, their experiences in the All-American Marching Band were such that, you know, as they've gotten older, they want to come back and relive that at homecoming. But our alumni are also very generous. You know, we're sitting here in Hagle Hall right now, and this facility would never have happened had it not been for the generosity of alumni from Purdue bands.
Yes, absolutely. So we've talked about traditions, but what is your favorite tradition as the director?
My favorite tradition as the director, I think, is the block P. That's my favorite tradition. Because, you know, every marching band you look at today that creates a formation on the field, from every high school band to college marching band, had its roots here at Purdue. And so we've been forming that block P for well over 100 years. And the reason I think it's my favorite is during our alumni band reunion, that's the final formation we make with the undergraduate band on the inside of the P, and then all the alumni come around and form the block P. And they're thrilled. The alumni are thrilled to come back and create that formation on the field with the undergrads. It means so much to our students. And one other tradition that I think is probably a close second for me is our affiliation with the Indianapolis 500. We've been the official band of the Indianapolis 500 for over 100 years. And, you know, I have spent 28 Memorial Days at the racetrack. It was funny during COVID when they didn't run the race. My wife said, "Well, what do we do this weekend?" And I said, "Well, we'll do like everybody else. We'll have a cookout and all those kind of things." We hadn't experienced it for almost 30 years. But what a rich tradition that is, to be part of something so unique. You know, what other college marching band in the country has something like the Indianapolis 500 they're associated with?
Yeah, it's a staple of that
It
race.
is.
What do the students think about being part of that?
Well, just to show you the commitment on the part of our students, they have to pay their own way back to participate in the 500. Final exams are typically 2 to 3 weeks before the 500. And this past year we had, I think, 300 of the 390 students come back for the 500, paying out of their own pocket. They love the experience, but they also know how important that tradition is to Purdue, and they want to keep that going.
They want to keep it perfect.
They do. They do.
So the Indy 500 is closer to home here, you know, in Indiana, but you've had performances all over the world. Mm-hmm. In 2008, the All-American Marching Band performed at the Olympics in Beijing.
We were part of the pre-ceremonies for the Olympics in Beijing. That was our first major travel.
How did all that come about?
Well, I knew the opportunity existed, and so I wrote a letter and applied, and they accepted us. They invited us to come. And prior to that, whenever Al took bands abroad, he would take a small component of the marching band to places like Venezuela and Colombia. He might take 100 students. And so I decided we're going to open this up to anyone who wants to go. And lo and behold, that first trip to China, we had 275 students sign up to go on that trip. And that was the beginning of our brainstorming about different locations we might take this band. But that China trip was indescribable. It really was. We performed in a concert hall in front of hundreds of military musicians from China. And the first piece we played was the Chinese national anthem. And so, of course, all these military men and women stood at attention during their national anthem. And then we played the national anthem of the United States.
Oh, wow.
And all of these Chinese military continued standing at attention while we played our national anthem. It was powerful. It really was. So that, and then we performed a concert at the Great Wall of China, which is also spectacular.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
You got to go to LA 2028, right?
Yeah, that would be great, wouldn't it?
You can go as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 2010, Purdue became the first Big Ten school to perform at the Macy's
Right.
Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York City. Tell us how that came about and how you were able to organize that big trip.
Well, one of my colleagues at the time is a man by the name of Max Jones. And Max was an assistant director at Purdue, but prior to coming to campus, he was the director of bands at Concord High School in Elkhart, Indiana. And the Concord Band was a perennial state champion marching band. They had participated in the Macy's parade on 2 or 3 occasions, and Max encouraged me to think about applying to perform at Macy's. And I thought, well, no other Big Ten school's done this. You know, what would it take for us to go? So I submitted an application, and lo and behold, we were accepted.
These stories keep happening.
I know, we were accepted, and but the application was 2 years before the actual parade.
Okay.
That's how the Macy's parade works. So we had 2 years really to plan and prepare for this performance. And so on Monday before Thanksgiving, we loaded buses here in West Lafayette and we headed east. We drove through the night, ended up in New Jersey early in the morning, Tuesday. The students started doing their touring of New York. And Wednesday night before the parade, the students got in their uniforms and we loaded our buses and we drove to the Macy's store on 34th Street and we had a 3 a.m. rehearsal.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the NBC requires all the participating bands to rehearse in front of the store in the middle of the night. I think what they're looking for, you know, there's that emblem, that Macy's emblem on the street, and I think simply they just want to make sure each band is centered on that logo, right? So
Sure.
we did our routine one time and we hit our marks and so forth, and the producer said, "Purdue, that's all I need." And I turned to the producer and I said, "Don't we have 20 minutes to rehearse?" And he said, "Sure." And so I yelled, "Run it back." And so we did the Macy's routine as many times as we could in 20 minutes. We loaded the buses, slept on 8th Avenue for a while, and then we led the Macy's Thanksgiving Parade the next day. And that's probably one of the highlights of my life, is to be part of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade with this band. It was just a very special moment for all of us.
That's incredible. You know, we've talked about all these different places. Tell us about the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Dublin, Ireland.
We have been in the St. Patrick's Day Parade 3 times now. 2013 was our first adventure to Ireland. And so during spring break, the band traveled around the Republic of Ireland the first part of the week, and then we landed in Dublin. The St. Patrick's Day Parade in Dublin is, I think, unlike most St. Patrick's Day parades anywhere in the world. It's a very intimate parade. The crowd is really right down on top of the parade participants. And we were the final group in the parade. So as we were marching, we had, I think, 375 students in that parade. The last 4 minutes of the national broadcast, the broadcaster said, "Let's just sit back and listen to this brilliant performance by this band from Purdue University." And so for 4 minutes, we had national coverage without any kind of commentary or talking, just listening to and watching the All-American Marching Band perform in that parade in front of hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world, all over Europe. They come to Dublin for that parade. So we had such a successful time in 2013, we wanted to do it again. So we went again in 2018, we went again in 2023. I wouldn't be surprised to see our band in the parade in 2027. You know, this is the beginnings of another one of those traditions that I think we'd like to keep going.
So we've talked about Ireland, Indianapolis, China. What is your favorite place that you've taken the band and why?
Well, my favorite place is New York. It's to the Macy's parade. for all the reasons I mentioned, but it's a very different experience. You march the parade before you see the national television broadcast. So we started the parade at 9 a.m. and we marched throughout the streets of New York, and we ended up down at 34th Street. And then everybody breaks ranks and we get organized and we line up right there in front of the Macy's store. And they literally give you a green flag when it's your turn to march. And we had 1 minute and 20 seconds to do our performance. So we stormed down the street and we played our performance. And as we're marching off the street, we're playing Hail Purdue. And I felt in my pocket, my cell phone started to explode. It was buzzing left and right, and people were sending me text messages from all over the world about our performance at Macy's. And so I think the national audience for the Macy's parade is 50 million people. That was a very special performance for us, for sure. But close seconds for me have been each one of the bowl performances we have done with Purdue football. I've traveled with the band and Purdue football to Orlando. We've been to San Francisco. Of course, we've been to Detroit twice. We've been to Texas. Those bowl experiences are very special, especially for the students. And so those would be close seconds behind our Macy's performance.
I love it. Getting the band out there on that national and international
Yeah, you're
stage.
right, for sure.
So we've talked about the band, we've talked about traditions. It's just such an iconic thing at Purdue University. Why do you think Purdue's band is different from other universities across the country?
That's a great question. I've had that conversation with many of my colleagues throughout the country. What makes Purdue so unique? You can talk about the fact that we have no school of music here. We do have a music degree at Purdue now, but there's not a full-blown school of music. Everyone who's been in our department, every participant of the All-American Marching Band does it just because they want to and they love it. I think that plays into the success of our program. But I also think we can do some things with our band at Purdue that other universities can't. So beginning back in the Spots era and the Wright era, the band started traveling, and they took trips to South America and, as I mentioned, to Japan and Canada and Europe. And we have all of these rich traditions that many bands in the country, they're lucky if they have one. So I think that's what really sets our band apart from the other college marching bands in the country, and what makes it so special to become a member of the All-American Marching Band. I think that's the most important part of it, is just the rich tradition of this department.
Sure. We've discussed your teaching career.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to you to teach Boilermakers in music? What is your favorite part about leading the students, interacting with them, that mentorship element that you have as the director?
Well, our students they're participating in music as an avocation. And with that, if we do our job right here, if we teach music and we teach the value of the arts to our students, they will be the school board members and the members of symphony and community bands and boards of directors and so forth that can really make an impact on the arts. I think that's the future, teaching the non-major. I wish many of my colleagues around the country could understand the importance of that, especially in those locations where they have schools of music. Because I think the proof is in the pudding, and at Purdue our students go out and they become members of these community bands and orchestras, and they want to continue playing music throughout their lives. Huh. And that's what's important to me about teaching our students at Purdue. Now, we also give some pretty tremendous concerts here, and so just the thrill of performance is also another element of that. But I would be very disappointed if our Purdue students left here and did not become strong advocates for the arts wherever they land.
Sure. We're sitting in the new Mark and Sharon Hegel Hall. We talked about it a little bit already. Why was it so important to have a new home dedicated to Purdue bands and orchestras?
Well, when Purdue bands moved into the Elliott Hall of Music over 80 years ago, the department was still part of the military. And I think we had maybe 120 men in the department. And through the decades, the department just continued to grow and grow and grow. And course offerings were more than just marching band. We had jazz program, and we had orchestras and concert bands. And when I came to Purdue in 1995, there were about 600 students in our department. And by 2013, we had grown to almost 1,000 students. And it became apparent that the Elliott Hall of Music facilities could not accommodate our continued growth. The facilities were very dated, and we needed space not just to grow as a department, but we needed modern facilities that could provide us the best environment to teach. So that's why it was important for us to pursue Hagle Hall. Our enrollment this fall in 2024, we anticipate will be close to 1,400 students.
Wow.
Yeah, so to grow from 600 in 1995 to nearly 1,400 students today, I think that demonstrates why we needed to bust out of the Hall of Music and come to this beautiful space.
What has been the impact of this new home over the past couple of years for the students and for you?
Well, I think it's been immeasurable. The sheer fact that we can have rehearsals in state-of-the-art facilities that are acoustically designed specifically for orchestra or for concert band, I think that's important. So I believe the quality of our performances is increasing year after year now that we've been in this space. We also have 14 practice rooms in this building. When we were at the Hall of Music, we had 2.
Quite
So
different.
when it comes time for auditions, for ensemble auditions for the next semester, the practice rooms are busting to overflowing. There are kids in there throughout every day, well into the evening. As part of the Hagle Hall construction, we also have the Hull All-American Marching Band Complex located on West 3rd Street across the street from Shreve. And that also has transformed the All-American Marching Band's ability to rehearse. We house the entire marching band at Hull. We've added 26 minutes to our rehearsal every day by breaking the tradition of having to march from the Hall of Music down to the drill field and back. The campus community was pretty disappointed by that, but to have 26 extra minutes of rehearsal every day has changed our marching band for the better.
That's great.
Yeah.
You know, you're so beloved in this community. Everyone knows your name, even if you were in the band or not. What do you hope that your legacy will be as you step down as director?
Well, as the director of the All-American Marching Band and director of bands here, you know, I'm merely a steward of this program. I want my students, of course, to remember the wonderful musical experiences they had and the great halftime shows we performed. But most importantly, I want them to remember this beautiful family that is Purdue Bands and Orchestras. And you know, what I want my legacy to be is that I fostered an environment of caring, of you know, this kind of family atmosphere that I want to be part of. And you know, when I leave here as the steward of the All-American Marching Band, I hope my successor will continue to do that very thing, because I know how important it is to my students.
Absolutely. So tell us about your plans for the future. How do you want to continue to impact Purdue?
Well, I will step down as the director of the All-American Marching Band, but I will continue as the Wright Chair of Purdue University Bands and Orchestras, and I will also continue to conduct the Purdue Wind Ensemble. I'm approaching official retirement age soon, and I have 6 grandchildren.
Oh.
So I want to give myself more time to spend with my grandkids, free up my schedule a little bit in the fall, remove some of the physical and mental demands that the marching band program brings to the table for me, because it as you can imagine, going on a trip with 400 students, that can be a little stressful at times. So
I can imagine, yeah.
those kinds of things I look forward to. The thing that I will miss is my day-to-day interaction with all of these students. They're such incredible young men and women. They're just incredible representatives of Purdue, and I will miss the day-to-day interaction with them.
Are you going to take your grandkids to a football game and sit in the stands for the first time?
I will. I'll take them to a football game. One thing I'll continue to do, though, and this is what other directors of bands in the country do, I'll attend every home football game, and I'll conduct the Star-Spangled Banner and the alma mater, and then the staff will do all the rest. But that is an opportunity afforded to the director of bands in most every institution in the country. They have the opportunity to conduct the banner and their school's alma mater. So I'll continue to do that.
What a cool tidbit. I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. We've talked about you've traveled all over the world representing Purdue. What does this Boilermaker spirit and community mean to you?
This being part of this department and part of this program, the marching band program, has been the joy of my life. As I said earlier, I never dreamed that I would be standing in front of that All-American Marching Band as its conductor. It means the world to me. And, when I look back at the incredible memories we've made, I can think about individual students I've taught throughout the years that were part of the marching band. And, so if that sums up what this program means to me, I would tell you that it has been the joy of my life to be part of this.
So your last football season is coming up quickly. Mm-hmm. What are you looking forward to most this fall?
I'm looking forward to business as usual. Okay. I am. Ever since I made my announcement, it truly has been business as usual. We had to plan halftime shows, and we had to prepare students to return to campus next week for band camp, and all the details that accompany an organization like the marching band. But as far as specific things I'm looking forward to, I look forward to every pregame show because it's my favorite. I look forward to a great Boilermaker football season. I'm very hopeful for our Fighting Boilermakers that they'll have a great season. But of course, we also have a brand new class of rookie members coming into the All-American Marching Band. And one of the greatest moments for those rookie members is the first time they march into Ross-Ade Stadium.
Oh, I bet.
I remember my first march into Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. I couldn't believe I was there. And I was so nervous, and I know our students feel the same way. But the minute they set foot onto that football field at Ross-Ade Stadium, it all changes. They're a member of the All-American Marching Band, and here they are, their dream come true to be out there on that football field. That's probably the thing that I'll look forward the most, is those rookie members taking the field for the first time.
I bet that's surreal.
It is, and it's a very special moment, for sure.
What would you say your next giant leap is? It can be personally or professionally. It sounds like being a grandpa is up there.
That's at the top of my list. I will continue to work in music. Music is not just something I do, it's who I am. I talked to my students last spring, and I just asked them, why are you here? Why do you play? And we agreed that it wasn't just that they needed an hour break from their academic classes, or, those are the kind of the pet answers we get about why students play music at Purdue. They play because music is such a part of who they are. And it will always be that way to me. So every opportunity I have to guest conduct, or, I'm the conductor of the Kokomo Park Band. It's an adult community band. I'm the conductor of the Indiana Wind Symphony in Carmel. That affords me opportunities, hopefully deep into my retirement. And so I'll continue to do those kinds of things. Because of the high profile of this position and the work related to it, I'd like to spend more time taking care of me. Just doing whatever it takes for me to have a long, productive, and healthy retirement. That's what I'd like to do.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners or our viewers?
I think probably my parting comments would be about the incredible staff and faculty we have at Purdue University in our band and orchestra department. These individuals, I think, have the same kind of passion for teaching non-majors that I do. I think we share that passion together. And I think this department will be in great hands moving forward. Not only do we continue to grow, but the education our students receive from this world-class faculty and these wonderful staff members is unlike any I see anywhere. So my hat's off to my colleagues, and I just hope the very best for them as they continue their careers at Purdue. Hopefully they'll see a 30-year anniversary sometime down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it was such a pleasure. I had so much fun talking to you.
Well,
I know our audience will love it too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.